Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, we recounted the battle between Testarossa and Twilight. Although Twilight had been annihilated, his core still remained inside Velzard's body. In this episode, we shift our focus to Guy and Velzard, where the power of Guy's ultimate skill, Lord of Pride, will be finally revealed in the light novel. So, let's get started. Suspended in midair, dazzling streaks of white and red clashed, their overwhelming energy condensing into a singular mass capable of obliterating entire star systems. Each collision sent shockwaves rippling through space, yet due to the protective barrier shielding the ground, the only visible effects were howling snowstorms raging below. Guy's attacks had no effect on Velzard, not because he lacked the strength, but because he had yet to unleash his full power. He remained in control of the battlefield, aware of every unfolding event, Testarossa's victory, the foolish chatter of the weaklings, and even the subtle shifts within Velzard. From the very start of their battle, Guy had sensed the presence of a third party, and had remained vigilant ever since. However, because he had to keep Velzard in check, he couldn't force this hidden existence to reveal itself. It was thanks to Testarossa that Twilight's true nature had been exposed, and now, she had even managed to defeat him. At last, Guy could focus entirely on Velzard. Still, Guy found it hard to believe that Twilight had been truly eradicated. He suspected that his core lingered within Velzard's body and noticed that Testarossa had come to the same conclusion. This realization led Guy to reassess Testarossa's level of threat, particularly the terrifying power she had just displayed. According to conventional understanding, the void could not be controlled. Once unleashed, it indiscriminately consumed everything caught within the nihilistic world's effect. And yet Testarossa had wielded it with absolute precision, erasing only Twilight. Even for Guy, who stood at the very peak of strength, this was astonishing. Moreover, he recognized the sheer complexity of what Testarossa had accomplished, constructing a prison of void over time, sealing Twilight within, and severing his connection to the outside world. Guy had also observed the moment when Testarossa's white flare incinerated Twilight, carefully tracking the movement of Infan, which allowed him to confirm and locate Twilight's core within Velzard. Guy couldn't help but admire Testarossa. For a fleeting moment, he even entertained the thought that, should he let his guard down, he might lose to her. Of course, he had no intention of making that mistake. His priority now was to deal with Velzard. A thought communication from Testarossa reached him. She was entrusting the rest to him. Guy understood that she was already exhausted, her magical reserves nearly depleted. Even so, he asked her to maintain the void field surrounding Velzard. Testarossa casually agreed. With this layer of void in place, they could ensure that Twilight would not be reborn. Everything was ready. Guy grinned, turning to face Velzard. Their battle had raged for dozens of hours, yet neither had fought at full strength. Now, the true clash would begin. Guy activated Calamity Claw, a devastating ability that infiltrated the target's body upon contact, infecting them with destruction particles. It was an attack that inflicted more damage on the mind than the body. Just a mere graze would corrupt the soul, making it particularly lethal against spiritual lifeforms. However, against Velzard, it was utterly useless. Anything that touched her would be frozen instantly, a power that stemmed from Infan. Whether physical or spiritual, all things were immobilized upon contact. Watching Velzard's amused smile, Guy felt a twinge of irritation. Since their very first encounter, her personality had remained unchanged. However, a thought crossed Guy's mind. Perhaps Velzard had even frozen her own emotions. His guess was correct. In truth, during her time with Guy, Velzard had begun to experience something new, something akin to joy. As we previously mentioned, Velzard held the key to opening the gate to Star Palace because she was its guardian. She had spent eons alone, unquestioningly fulfilling her duty to protect the sacred domain. That was why her time with Guy felt so fresh, so unfamiliar. Yet she feared that allowing herself to indulge in these emotions might cause her to forget her purpose. Upon awakening Lord of Envy, Velzard had taken extreme measures to prevent herself from losing sight of her mission. Using Lord of Envy and Lord of Patience, she sealed her own heart, freezing her emotions as though casting aside all hesitation. And now, Velzard found herself lost in a trance, immersed in the very state she had long yearned for. Her heart overflowed with a rare sense of happiness. She had to defeat Guy at his full strength, to prove that she was stronger, to earn his recognition. Yet, a question gnawed at her: why did she feel the need to defeat Guy? Velzard ignored the doubt, shutting herself off further. Her lips curled into a smile, but deep within, a storm raged. Velzard's original plan had been to force Guy into a prolonged battle, driving him to exert his full strength until they reached a deadlock, at which point she would unleash Twilight's pseudo-dragon body as her trump card. However, Guy proved to be unexpectedly cautious, maintaining a probing stance rather than fully committing to the fight. It's important to clarify that Twilight's core had undergone complete digitalization, making his existence within Velzard akin to an authority in itself. Moreover, in recent times, he had evolved rapidly, even surpassing the status of a Manus. The fact that he could manifest the pseudo-dragon body was proof of this transformation, along with the fact that he now wielded unparalleled power. Even so, Twilight was utterly shocked by Testarosa's ability to manipulate the dangerous force of nihilistic world at will. Velzard, too, acknowledged that her entire body was now wrapped in the void, preventing her from utilizing the pseudo-dragon body. Well, Velzard wasn't completely incapable of breaking free. With her immense magical reserves, she could potentially disperse the void surrounding her. However, she knew things wouldn't be that simple. The opponent could easily summon the void again, making it a pointless struggle. Twilight, being a being of supreme intelligence, had already analyzed the situation thoroughly. He realized that this void had been created solely to seal him away, preventing him from regenerating through the pseudo-dragon body. The novel's descriptions were vague, but based on analysis, all of the info from the pseudo-dragon body had been consumed by Testarosa's void. As a result, Twilight himself had no clear information of how he was defeated, only that he had lost. Yet, there was one glaring inconsistency. The author had repeatedly emphasized Twilight's insatiable curiosity. Given that, it was completely illogical for him to not even attempt to analyze the reason behind his own defeat. Back to the story. Although she could no longer use the pseudo-dragon body, Velzard was unexpectedly pleased. She preferred to defeat Guy using her own power. In the next instant, she fully unleashed the desires hidden deep within her heart. To her, Guy was everything. To obtain Guy, she discarded all reason. Guy had been maintaining his distance in the air, but suddenly, an overwhelming sense of danger struck him. Without hesitation, he shot backward, just in time to evade the frozen tempest that engulfed the space where he had just been. Velzard's assault erupted like a flash of violet lightning. Throwing aside all strategy, Velzard in her pure, instinct-driven state was the most terrifying threat imaginable. The sheer magical energy released by the strongest true dragon surged uncontrollably, creating a storm so intense that it seemed as though it would tear apart Testarosa's void. Yet, this was not a deliberate act on Velzard's part. Rather, it was a byproduct of the overwhelming force of her battle intent. Despite the mounting pressure, Testarosa, who was retreating toward the defensive barrier, continued to manipulate the void with unwavering precision, skillfully guiding Velzard's energy. The finesse of her technique was nothing short of an art form, so much so that even Rain, who had always been at odds with Testarosa, had to admit her inferiority, conceding that she could never reach this level of control. Guy also expressed his gratitude. Without Testarosa's intervention, Twilight would have already returned, and his chances of victory would have plummeted. Deep down, he was truly relieved that Testarosa was here. As for Testarosa herself, she was well aware that she had no strength left for another confrontation with Twilight. If he were to revive, the battlefield would descend into utter chaos. Moreover, she understood that in Velzard's current state, the only one who could stand against her was Guy. Even other true dragons like Velgrind or Veldora would likely be powerless. Of course, if Rimura-sama were here, there would surely be a way. But sighing at her own limitations, TenSura pushed that thought aside. She had no other choice. Her only hope now rested on Guy. Finally, TenSura arrived at the barrier. Moss had prepared a comfortable setting to welcome his master, using his abilities to adjust the temperature, creating the warmth of a gentle spring afternoon. Not stopping there, he had even materialized chairs from his skill, material creation. The ground had long since been frozen solid, forcing everyone to remain standing. However, Moss would never allow TenSura-sama to suffer the same fate. A truly exceptional subordinate must anticipate their master's needs before being ordered to act. Rain scoffed at Moss, complaining that he should have done this sooner. With that, she plopped down into a chair, voicing her discontent with a mixture of irritation and relief. She had been enduring the cold all this time, forcing herself to withstand the freezing winds due to the urgency of the situation. But now that Moss had prepared everything so meticulously, going so far as to ensure that everyone had a chair, Rain couldn't help but feel that he had been holding back energy all along. She was especially annoyed by the fact that TenSura seemed to be receiving preferential treatment. Seated gracefully, TenSura glanced at Rain with mild amusement, asking why she was complaining about something so ridiculous. As a subordinate, it was only natural for Moss to be devoted to his master's well-being. Misery, realizing Rain had overstepped, quickly intervened, explaining that Rain was simply under a lot of pressure and that she had been giving her utmost effort. TenSura, however, chuckled, noting that Misery was far too indulgent toward Rain. In fact, she outright declared that Rain hadn't been working hard at all. Misery, completely bewildered, stared blankly at TenSura, unable to comprehend what she meant. TenSura let out a sigh, exasperated yet somewhat sympathetic. To Misery, Rain was nothing short of a genius, a prodigy beyond compare. Meanwhile, Moss, determined to avoid being drawn into a conversation between primordial demons, did his best to minimize his presence, hoping to escape unnoticed. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. TenSura turned to Moss with a wry smile, remarking that he had grown significantly thanks to her guidance. Moss broke into a cold sweat. The subordinates under TenSura were all survivors of relentless trials, thriving under an unyielding standard that left no room for failure. Though he felt a surge of injustice, Moss said nothing, merely accepting TenSura's words as absolute truth. Misery, unwilling to concede, countered that Moss had indeed been well trained. However, she argued that if Rain put in the effort, she too could reach the highest level. After all, Rain had once fought TenSura to a standstill. TenSura blinked in surprise. She had absolutely no recollection of such an event. Sensing danger, Rain quickly changed the subject, stating that what truly mattered now was Guy-sama's victory. Her clumsy attempt at deflection was so obvious that even Sauka, watching from the sidelines, picked up on it. Leaning toward Moss, she whispered a remark about Rain's terrible cover-up. Moss, however, looked utterly defeated. He wanted no part in this perilous discussion. Rain sensed danger, her body trembling slightly. This was purely the result of her own reckless lies. Backed into a corner, she decided to double down, loudly declaring that she would go assist Guy-sama in battle. TenSura couldn't help but burst into laughter, remarking that if Rain wanted to die, she wouldn't stop her. The only thing left behind would be a joke of someone getting instantly defeated. Sauka and Moss dared not speak, but both silently agreed with TenSura. Rain's declaration was simply too ridiculous. Even Misery, usually supportive, sincerely advised Rain not to burden Guy-sama and instead focus on what she could actually do. Skillfully shifting the topic, Misery mentioned that their subordinates had already been dispatched to Rubrios. Though Rain was internally crumbling, she quickly adjusted her mood, acknowledging how cold it was outside. Her response successfully diverted the conversation, and TenSura showed no intention of pursuing the matter of Rain's fabricated battle achievements. TenSura then turned to Moss, confirming the whereabouts of Carrera and the others. Due to the heavy snowfall that had accumulated on the battlefield, they had all been buried beneath the frozen landscape. Moss reported that their locations had been identified, and he slowly maneuvered the defensive barrier to hover directly above Carrera and the other's ice-encased figures. Given the current situation, the only ones who could provide meaningful combat power were Carrera and Abra. While others were also formidable, they were insignificant in the presence of Guy and Velzard. Delaying the rescue operation would have been the more prudent choice, but Testarossa still wished to restore Carrera. If possible, reviving Abra as well would be even better. Carrera could take Testarossa's place in battle, allowing Testarossa to withdraw and recover. Issuing the command to excavate, Testarossa left Moss sighing inwardly, faced with yet another near-impossible task. Back in Guy's battle, a sudden realization struck him. Velzard had always harbored jealousy toward him. Velzard, as if responding to his thoughts, let out a faint smile. But her rampage did not cease. Speaking her true feelings aloud, the world was dyed in pure white. Unlike Testarossa's nihilistic world, this was an entirely different phenomenon, an absolute, transparent isolation of reality, the absolute stop, the eternal world. Under the will of its master, all laws were forcibly halted. At that moment, Guy felt a mixture of confusion and understanding. He had finally sensed Velzard's hidden authority, something that seemed to be the opposite of Lord of Patience. It had to be Lord of Envy. However, its exact effects remained unknown to him. His expression grew solemn as a realization dawned upon him. Somewhere along the line, without him noticing, Velzard had come to understand his ultimate skill. Guy pushed aside any thoughts of evarage, focusing entirely on confronting Velzard with everything he had. If Velzard had been controlled, the situation would have been easier to handle. But the real problem was that she was challenging Guy of her own free will. This meant he had no choice but to entertain her until she was fully satisfied. At that instant, a shockingly powerful absolute stop swept past Guy's cheek. Had it struck him directly, even with his multiple layers of defensive barriers, it might have dealt a fatal blow. The proof of its destructive power lay in the distant mountain range. Where the attack had landed, the entire mountain collapsed. The freezing wave had penetrated deep into the rock, breaking the molecular bonds and reducing it to rubble under its own weight. It was an absurd display of raw, unrestrained violence. Guy sighed in frustration. True dragons were selfish to an infuriating degree. They never considered minimizing collateral damage and acted solely based on their emotions. Velzard had spent a long time lecturing Veldora, yet in reality, they were no different. Guy himself had once shared this reckless nature. However, with time and growth, and the promises he had made to his companions, he had learned to temper his actions. He still lived freely, but he had started considering those around him. But now, there was no room for restraint. For once, Guy began fighting at full power. Guy's ultimate skill, Lord of Pride, granted him numerous abilities. But its essence lay in one core function, the ability to perfectly replicate any skills he had witnessed. This was precisely why Guy had always encouraged other demon lords to awaken ultimate skills. It was also why he shamelessly sought to observe Rimura's method of awakening rain and misery to devil lords. To become the strongest, all he had to do was witness various ultimate skills and make them his own. With this mindset, he had spent countless ages, from the distant past to the present, studying and assimilating the powers of countless mighty beings. As a result, he was always prepared for any situation. This was especially evident in combat. Twilight's pseudo-dragon body, which had just been revealed, and Testarossa's nihilistic world, which had long remained hidden, so long as Guy had seen them, he could replicate them with Lord of Pride. By turning even his enemy's skills into his own weapons, Guy ensured he would never lose due to a lack of options. However, this time was different. This time, things were tricky. Velzard was already aware of his ability to mimic others' authorities. And because of that, she had kept her true power hidden. Instead, she had relied solely on Lord of Patience throughout the fight. Her trump card remained veiled, waiting for the right moment to strike. Guy was, of course, intimately familiar with Lord of Patience, which was why he had been able to counter Velzard's attacks with minimal cost thus far. However, Velzard's inherent power was exceptionally dangerous, and the sheer disparity in their magical reserves was overwhelming. Guy could not afford to show a single flaw, or he would risk an instant, fatal strike. Based on the current trajectory of their battle, the moment Velzard revealed her hidden ultimate skill would be the decisive turning point. Whether Guy's superior analytical abilities could activate in that critical instant would determine the outcome. This level of unpredictability, even for someone as powerful as Guy, was frustrating. He had never imagined he would be forced into such a position, where victory hinged on a mere gamble. For the proud Guy, this was an insult to his very dignity. Yet, despite being backed into a corner, his belief in his own strength remained unshaken. No matter the circumstances, his resolve would never waver. As time slowly passed, Guy broke free from Velzard's absolute stop. This authority was absurdly domineering, forcibly halting all kinetic energy, yet precisely because of its crude, brute-force nature, it was possible to resist it through sheer willpower. Only someone like Guy could accomplish such a feat. Fortunately, the effort had not drained him significantly, leaving him in peak condition. More importantly, through his prolonged observation of this rare opportunity, Guy became certain that Velzard's actions were of her own volition, but at the same time, it was highly likely that she had been subtly influenced by Twilight Valentine's cunning manipulations. Guy understood Twilight's intention perfectly. He sought to observe the battle between Guy and Velzard, using their techniques and insights to refine his own theories. Velzard was not foolish, but she was simple-minded and obsessively single-minded in her emotions, making her an easy target for Twilight's deceit. Guy felt a headache coming on. Even if Twilight's influence was only indirect, it was still Velzard's own choice to act this way. If he could not break through to her, he would not be able to stop her. That was why Guy had hesitated for so long, continuously analyzing the situation instead of taking action. However, it was time to make a decision. He could not allow Velzard to continue rampaging unchecked. More importantly, an ominous premonition lingered in his mind. Twilight Valentine was, without a doubt, the most despicable scum in history, using every underhanded means to spread malice across the world. Yet, in the distant past, there had been a time when he was not entirely detestable. Then, one day, something changed. His personality underwent a drastic shift, and he began conducting inhumane experiments over and over again. De Gruel might know the truth behind this transformation, but Guy himself did not. Regardless, none of that mattered now. Twilight had laid his hands on someone Guy considered important. That alone made him an enemy. A quiet, smoldering rage ignited within Guy's heart. The fact that Twilight had parasitized Velzard and twisted her powers into something unnatural filled him with utter disgust. The truth no longer mattered. Twilight was the one who had to take responsibility for all of this. With that thought, Guy unleashed Napalm Burst, an elemental spell that manifested into massive, winding streams of molten flame, coiling around Velzard in a relentless dance. He knew full well that such an attack was meaningless against Frost Dragon Velzard. It was merely a method of containment. As expected, Velzard countered effortlessly, exhaling a faint breath that instantly transformed into diamond dust, scattering Guy's flames into nothingness. This was freezing breath, an ability Velzard should only have been capable of using in her dragon form. Yet here she was, casting it with ease in her humanoid form. Guy clicked his tongue in annoyance. Velzard was undeniably formidable. But what he saw next was not hostility. It was a joyous smile, the excitement of clashing against a worthy adversary. Guy found himself strangely satisfied. Though he was troubled by how to resolve their conflict, this only served to invigorate his fighting spirit. Guy firmly believed that those devoid of emotions and willpower were weak. Velzard, precisely because she was consumed by envy, had become unimaginably strong. Of course, there were likely other emotions at play as well. As for Twilight, he was the exact opposite, an irredeemable bastard who had discarded his emotions entirely. Perhaps Velzard, while being manipulated by Twilight, was also unknowingly turning that influence into fuel for her own growth. However, after several more exchanges, Guy rid himself of any unnecessary thoughts. Whether or not Velzard could regain her rationality was irrelevant. Twilight had to be eliminated. If Velzard was willful and reckless, then Guy was the very embodiment of arrogance. He had no interest in empathizing with his opponent's circumstances. If something displeased him, he would simply destroy it. He acted purely on his own whims. Twilight was an eyesore. Guy had finally decided to get serious. Seeing Guy getting serious, Velzard was overjoyed. Now, at last, she could fully indulge in the thrill of battle in a world where only the two of them existed. Thinking this, she couldn't help but smile. From the beginning of the fight until now, though either had fought at full power, Guy had yet to reveal a single opening, maintaining a response pattern so flawless it could be considered textbook. Guy was able to collect magicules from the atmosphere like humans to cast magic, essentially utilizing the magicule energy released by Velzard here in battle. Although, in theory, this method was highly inefficient, it was entirely different when executed by Guy. He could instantly convert magicules into magic, without even the slightest delay. As the strongest primordial demon, even if Velzard fought with everything she had, there was no guarantee she could defeat Guy. Moreover, she was fully aware of Guy's genius-level insight. His unparalleled analytical ability allowed him to see through the essence of skills with just a glance. If she did not keep a trump card hidden, she knew that relying solely on Lord of Patience would make victory impossible. One of her trump card, Twilight, had been sealed away thanks to Testaross's interference. And now, Lord of Envy seemed to have been detected by Guy as well. Velzard understood that she had only one chance to win, to land a decisive strike using Lord of Envy. For that, she had to remain patient, using Lord of Patience to wear Guy down, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash her final attack. Even though luck didn't seem to be on her side, Velzard still accepted it as the will of fate. Guy had finally decided to fight seriously. Her goal had been achieved. Now, at last, the two who stood at the pinnacle of the world would engage in a battle where both fought with everything they had. Alright, that's all for this video. To be honest, I was convinced that the conclusion to Guy and Velzard's battle would happen in Volume 22, but surprisingly, the author has managed to drag it out into Volume 23. That said, there are a few hints about how this fight will progress. The first is that Guy has realized that in order to stop Velzard, he must reach into her heart. That suggests that the web novel's pattern of emotional confrontations will likely follow its usual course. The second is the subtle hints about Twilight, that there was a specific moment or event that drastically changed his personality. Previously, the explanation had always been that Twilight was conducting inhumane experiments in an attempt to fulfill Veldanava's wish for species diversity, but now it seems there might have been a single, sudden event that altered his very nature. However, TenSura has always had plenty of cases where characters' personalities shift due to possession. Michael inside Rudra, Jahil inside Footman, and now Twilight inside Velzard. Just as a joke, what if Ivarij ends up having the voice of the world inside him? In our next episode, we'll shift our focus to Sarian, as the great battle to defend the Divine Tree begins. The next episode is going to be just as exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.